Greetings to everyone. It's a great privilege to be talking to you, and thank you for this opportunity to present the Gourma Biosphere Reserve in Mali. This is the product of 11 years' work between the Mali Elephant Project. On the right-hand side, the map shows the location of the reserve, the orange polygon in central Mali. And for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to present the zones and the various governance and enforcement structures for them. In this map, we've zoomed in to show the different zones. There are two core areas which are strictly protected, surrounded by a buffer zone where no settlement or exploitation is allowed, and just 72 hours maximum stay for grazing purposes only. And these are embedded in a transition zone of regulated human use of natural resources. As you can see, the little black dots, they represent human settlements, and that there are some of these in those core and buffer areas. So community engagement is going to be a big part of this process. For the transition zone, I'm not going to dwell on this too much because it makes provision for a model of elephant-centered community natural resource management that we've been developing since 2009 with local communities, with the support of government. And this has been made possible by decentralization legislation, which places natural resources under the control of local communities. So the project has been helping bring communities together to develop these systems of resource management. If you want to know more about this, there's a paper, a 2021 paper. It's open access, but if you'd like a copy, do send me an email. So the core areas, these are obviously these are more difficult, and will require a process of community engagement. We haven't started on this since the designation of the reserve, but I want to give an idea of the process by giving an example of Lake Banzema, some work we did in 2009. Lake Banzema is a key resource for elephants because it's the only water accessible to elephants in the late dry season. And through the 1990s and 2000s in particular, human pressure, in particular livestock pressure, was increasing rapidly and lake levels were going down. And then in 2009, it dried completely. It was clear something needed to be done, but we didn't know what. And so we conducted a socio-economic survey to try and understand the system better. We wanted to understand local perceptions, the way local people used the areas, and to understand the whole system a bit better. So we interviewed all those living around the lake, households and individuals and groups, and we interviewed the migratory herders who were also using the lake at that time. And we found several quite surprising findings. First there was a very high degree of resource exploitation by outside commercial interests. For example, this firewood, this wood lorry. We also found that over 96% of the cattle using the lake didn't belong to local people, but to people living in distant urban centres. And the map on the left-hand side shows some of the movements of these cattle, some coming from adjacent countries, some coming from other parts of Mali. We also found that while individual ethnicities and clans had systems to manage natural resources, they didn't respect each other's, and so this resulted in a failure of regulation and governance. In addition, over 50% of the local population was suffering from waterborne diseases, and if you look at the water they're drinking, you can see why. And so we brought all the local stakeholders together, parts of the community, government, NGOs, and discussion was focused on what were the major problems for the local people. We provided the findings of the survey to help with the discussion, and eventually a common perception was developed of the problems and the causes of those problems. This created a certain unity because people saw things in the same way, and we could then say, well, what are the solutions? And the local people said they would be happy to move away from the lake if they could move to an area of good pasture and clean water. We worked with them to find a suitable area of good pasture, and we created a borehole to provide the clean water. The local people moved, and they created management systems for the resources in their new relocation area, working with foresters in their enforcement, and then helping foresters also with the enforcement of keeping Lake Banzena clear of human settlement. When we checked back a few months later, everything was going well. This is what the local women said to us. Since we have left, we no longer have stomach aches. The men can go back to Banzena if they want, but we're going to stay here. So as I said, this system was working well until the conflict and the lawlessness struck in 2012. Solar panels were stolen. We replaced them twice. They were stolen each time. And so the local community had to move back to Banzena. But we have kept in contact with them, and they have been working on managing their resources, and we hope to continue that work with them. And so to try and draw a few things together, it's a potential model for particular contexts for the creation of new protected areas in populated landscapes, and is particularly appropriate where local communities have control or tenure over their natural resources. It has the advantage of requiring fewer government resources because they can be focused on the core and the buffer zones. At the same time, government foresters can support communities in the enforcement of their management, their resource management systems. For example, in providing armed support when explaining local rules to armed herders. It also contributes to sustainable development because the resource management helps improve livelihoods, food security, occupations for youth, improve social cohesion and local governance. And it just rests me to thank all our partners and supporters, and to thank you for your attention.